On this episode, we have Ginny Gilmore with us today. Ginny has written the book, co-authored a book, Wisdom from the Woods, and has so much wisdom and insight to share as a seeker. We are thrilled to jump in and explore with her. You're listening to the Red Couch Rebels, a safe, comfy space for vulnerability and self-growth. I'm Jenny.
And I'm Erin.
We are seekers and self-advocates.
Yeah, we're not your doctors.
Or your therapists.
No, we're just fellow seekers on our own journeys of self-discovery.
Explore your inner rebel with us.
Let's sink in.
It is our pleasure to have Virginia Gilmore, who we will reference as Ginny because that's who we know. You are our Ginny. Ginny, we are so grateful to have you with us today. You have been such an inspiration, and the conversations that we have had with you have really been the spark of this podcast.
Absolutely. The connection that we have with you, and the depth that we go, and even the speed that we go at has been so nurturing for, I think, all of us. It was a catalyst that started the idea of even having a podcast. So we really want to thank you for the wonderful, heartfelt conversations that you've shared with us.
Well, thank you both, Jenny and Erin, for this invitation, which is unique and has sparked such new life in me over the time since we began to talk. The fact that you're exploring archetypes is, as they say, right up my alley, and it's been a long time. And our sort of intergenerational spirit that we share together is something I've yearned for, and I am very grateful already before we even begin this part of it. But I have no idea. I mean, sure, I have some ideas, but we never know where we're going. So
right.
That's part of the
fun.
Yeah. Our conversations always beautifully unfold. And it's been that way, Ginny. You and I have worked together. I mean, our time goes back with our work together with Sophia Partners, of course, but most intimately, we've worked together starting in like 2020 with your book, Wisdom from the Woods. And things have just evolved as Erin and I have gotten to know each other. And so, yes, we're super excited today to really continue our conversations and explorations around growth and relationship together. And today what we want to hear is more about your story and how things have unfolded for you as you look at your story through the lens of archetypes, but of course, being that we're on the Red Couch Rebels stage here
Yeah.
on the Red Couch, we want to hear more about your inner rebel.
It's a good thing I didn't have a red couch when I was your age. I don't know where I would have gone. Wow. I love the red couch.
I think you did, though. Like in reading your book,
did.
you had it in your own way. Yeah.
That's a really good way to say it. I love that. I think so too.
Yeah. So when you think about your inner rebel in the context of, I mean, it could be your story from Wisdom from the Woods, like what comes to heart for you as you thought about our conversation today and what you wanted to share?
I think it's important to lay a little foundation that threads through my life. And then a piece that I think expresses the inner rebel in a way that when I read it today, I understood it differently because of what we're doing. When I was about 10, I was a kind of unusually spiritual kind of little girl. I had a real connection to nature. We lived in a woods, and I spent a lot of time by myself because I was the youngest by 7 years and 10 and a half years with my older brother. And so I was by myself with my dog and that kind of thing. And we went through the woods and all, and I found a tree house. And when I really needed to find a sense of home and a sense of safety, I climbed into that tree house and I sat there and I listened to the wind. And I don't know, I just listened to my heart. There was something so authentic about little girl 10 who hadn't been really tamed yet, so to speak. Um, and
Love
that's the
that.
connection to the wild woman that we'll talk about later. She really hadn't been conditioned, and she was asking good questions. And the question that came up that I never forgot is, how are we going to get along together in this world? You know, wind, spirit, please help me. How are we going to get along together in this world? I already knew at 10 years old how important that was. And basically, the wind said, well, great question, and you're going to have a role in that. And that's basically a knowing that got seeded and has grown over time. And as I look at my life, that thread, I can connect back to it a million times over. And when we end, I'd like to share a poem that I find very, very meaningful about that. But let me go forward a bit to go to your question more specifically. When I was turning 50, I was going through some really, really hard changes all at once. We can talk more about those changes later, but I was exhausted. I had worked so hard to do what I thought I needed to be and do, and I was just out of steam. I had just was ending a second marriage, and that was really, really discouraging to me. And my kids were gone. My youngest child, my daughter, had just left for college 1,000 miles away. So I was empty nesting, and we were selling the family business. A place where I had worked and been in working community for 17 years. So here I was, 50, single, no children, no job, pretty lost, pretty tired, pretty exhausted. And I went into the woods for 2 months, and that's a story in itself, how I got there. But I started to journal, and that journaling ultimately did lead to this book that you mentioned, Jenny. So I looked at my own story, and I found something right up front that I would like to share with you about that inner rebel energy, if you will.
Love it.
Before I got into the
Yes.
woods, I had this calling, and when you have something calling you, a yearning, sometimes the right opportunity just falls right in front of you. Well, it did for me. And there was this mandala workshop, and it was about your archetypal inner spirit, and it was for women. And I signed up for it. And over the weekend, the whole process is in the book of how we created each of us our own mandala. And my mandala was really interesting. It had the fire, the air, the wind, all of the elements. And there was a center to this mandala, and it was noticeable. And so when I'm telling my own story, I describe this particular mandala, who by this time, because of something that came through me, was named Persephone. And Persephone is a mythological woman who goes underworld for a while and comes back up and re-enters her life. So this, in a sense, became truly connected to my own journey. So I talk about this mandala Persephone. And this is what I say. Persephone will take me through the darkness, but she tells me to remember that her center is the brightest light imaginable. It sustains her. It's fiery red, the fire of life. Through all deaths, the essence survives. Not to be afraid. She looks so complete. She has so much of the experience of life in her. She is full, strong, and fluid in her energy. She will walk with me. She will be there for me. We have places to go that I don't know about. She mesmerizes me at night. What is she trying to say? Where does she want me to go? Well, it is that part of me, that fire in my belly, so to speak, or the fire in my soul, if you will. I prefer to say it even that way, that got re-sparked when the three of us started to have our conversations. What would I say, 27 years later or whatever? Yeah, long time later after writing these things. And it's still there. So I would call that inner rebel energy. And Aaron, you're reading that book by Dr. Gladys. I'd call it my juice, if you will.
Yeah.
My juice.
Yeah.
And that juice is still, it kind of every once in a while needs to be watered or it can
Mhm.
get flat.
Yeah.
And that's what I think women can do for each other, is to help
Mm.
nurture and water that juice that's in each of us in a unique way that has a purpose for being here. And you know what? Until we're done, it's not done. And I'm not sure it's done then. So
Yeah.
I've
Right?
come to believe that. Dr. Gladys helped me a lot in her book. And it's called The Well
A
Lived Life
well-lived life.
by Gladys McGarry.
Yep.
She helped me a lot because if she's 102 and her juice is still strong, what's wrong with me? My juice is still strong too.
Right.
So anyway, I thought that would be a way to begin our conversation and open up my understanding of what this inner rebel is, the rebel that's willing to take risks, the rebel that has a strength inside of her. I wore a little medal that my daughter gave me, and you can't see it, but it says fearless. Well, I'm not fearless, but she reminds me that I do have that inner rebel in me
Oh,
that she
no.
doesn't want to see go away. So maybe that's a good beginning for our conversation.
I love it
Yeah.
so much.
Definitely.
Aaron and I were just chatting on the couch here before starting about the idea of fear
Mhm.
and
Oh, yeah.
how it is there, and how do we put it to the back seat, not let it drive us, not let it control our everyday thoughts and actions. And it's hard, but yeah, that necklace is a beautiful reminder, and this conversation is a beautiful reminder for me.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, and
Thank you.
the connection with faith and fear, right? So when I hear you say fearless, I just made a big decision in my own life, and there was fear that came up, and I said to my brother, I don't need faith if I don't have any fear in taking the leap, right? So when I hear the word fearless, it reminds me of like leaning into your faith, right?
That's so true. I mean, there is a difference, I think. Let's just say that there's something that calls me to do, to go toward, and I'm afraid. If that fear is coming from a certain place, like, worried about all the things that could happen to me or something like that, it's running around in my thoughts, those voices inside of me. I don't necessarily listen. I have to discern between, kind of a good fear, a one that says, well, this is a leap. We're going to take this and feel that sense of faith about that. Um, and the fears that keep me from being my whole best self. I don't want to listen to that voice or those voices. Over time, I think I've gotten a little sharper at discerning the difference, but that took a long time. I made some mistakes, obviously, but that's how I learned. Um, so fear is a good thing, and it's also something that can become a block to our potential.
It can be downright paralyzing, right?
Downright paralyzing. Yes, yes.
Mhm.
I had that happen to me, and one of the things that I do when I experience myself shutting down or closing down or paralyzing is get help. I have to reach out and get some help so that I can find my way back or take some quiet time. Also, journaling is one of the things that really helps me, but sometimes it's big. Like, my body shut down for a while. I couldn't walk real well for a while a couple years ago. That was scary. That really was scary for me. I found my way through it, but I reached out for lots of help. Got to the other side,
Yeah, we have to.
and it. I had never met fear. I had met fear when I was so empty, like when I was turning 50, in one way. But this kind of fear, when physically I couldn't walk as well, and that kind of thing, was more paralyzing even. What I believe now is really important that I think I was doing in the woods is embodiment practices and learning how to find that center place of peace and really get in touch with my breathing when something really scary pops up in my life, and to practice that on a daily basis with things that aren't real big. Because when some things get real big, suddenly, if I learn to practice in certain ways, especially being inside my body and let my thinking rest, because my thinking is what gets me in trouble. It goes all over the place. What if, what if, what if? So if I can learn those kinds of things, and I think I was just naturally doing it in the woods, I just did it because I got off the wheel.
Slowed down. It's hard to do, but so important.
You know what just came through to me as you were talking was the thinking mind goes to what if, but when you're doing the embodiment, I guess some people would call it a practice, but when you're embodied, it's more of what is rather than what if.
Where am I now in this moment? And rest into the breath. It's very, very helpful. I think it's the most important thing for me now at this point, but I can't imagine it wasn't just as important all those other years. Uh, but at this juncture of my life, of course, there are some things that happen that can be heartbreaking and that can be very stressful also and cause fear. So I think this thing you call fear is huge. And it's huge in relationship to the potential of the inner rebel and the potential of the wild wise woman. This thing called fear. It can be a lens into even greater possibility than you thought, or it can be a lens into, as you said, just shutting you down, really paralyzing you, myself. Or so I think fear is as challenging as any emotion we have as human beings.
Looking back through your lifetime and how you started discovering your inner rebel, even if you didn't have words for it at the time, how do you think that fear played into those guidepost moments that, the memories that you really hold on to is like, that was a pivotal moment for
Yeah.
me? Do you think fear was a factor in those moments?
I think it was really critical in my life to come to terms with this thing called the startup curve. When I was learning something different, new, I can remember back as a young girl, I would get afraid because I didn't know how to do something. And I had this feeling that I should know how to do it right away. And of course, I didn't. I was there to learn it. I remember taking French lessons as a young girl, and I quit. And because, you go through this, anybody goes through a very uncomfortable time in a startup curve. And nobody explained that to me. I mean, as a little girl, somehow I just figured I should know how to do this stuff right away, really fast. And so it took me a long time to understand that. Uh, I can remember seeing in our business, which was a family manufacturing business, I could see how corporately, if you don't have a culture that understands a startup curve, when you, let's say, you buy a very on the edge new kind of machine that's going to do certain things for you in your product development, and of course it doesn't always work right, and you have to work with it, and you can't, put into your budget that you're going to make all this new money within the first whatever time period it takes. I saw us make that mistake, and I saw people get blamed and all this kind of stuff, and I never forgot that. And so that was really, really helpful for me, because if I was going to take a leap, such as going into the woods for 2 months, for God's sakes, out of the clear blue, I was going to go off the radar screen. Or if I was going to move toward a vision, there was going to be a startup curve. And it was going to be there for me, and I was going to get frightened, and it was going to be there for all of us. And I can remember that it was really my father's encouragement to me as a little girl growing up, who could say, you know what, you can do this. Don't think you can't. Everybody, he used to say this to his sons, and then he sort of said this to me. Everybody puts their pants on the same way. And it was kind of a male thing, but I never forgot that either. You're all equal. You can do this. And I believed him over time. And I can remember when a group of us began to envision starting the Women's Fund, for example. And we worked for 2 years to process that and learn about the community, do an assessment, and really understand what was needed from some organization like the Women's Fund. I'll never forget a moment when 2 of us, who were 2 of the 4 founders, were talking one noon, and this person said to me, "I don't think we're ready, Ginny. I'm afraid. I don't think we're ready." And I began to recognize when the moment was to move. And it was always a little before you're ready. I noticed over time, you're not quite ready, but you can't get any further if you don't take the leap. And I said, oh yeah, we got to go. We got to go. It's time. And we did take the leap. And of course, we just celebrated the 20th anniversary of that organization. We did go through that startup curve, and we could have actually stayed in it longer than we were willing to. And I think it would have built even stronger roots. But I really believe that we have to be kind and loving to ourselves when we're taking a leap into something that's brand new for us, and not think that we're going to be an immediate success or that everything's going to go smoothly. In fact, most of the things I hoped for over my life, they happened, but they didn't happen as I originally hoped they would. They looked different. Through this emergence process and through people working together, the intention's always there if it's meant to be, but it can form differently than one thinks, and it can form 20 years later when you least expect it. So as I looked through, the history of my life, I thought, wow, it all found a form somehow. But if you don't take that leap and you don't take that risk and you try to make it the best time possible when you just can't turn back anymore, you got to go with it. And that's sort of a rebel energy because most of what the leaps were about for me were pretty countercultural. So they were, you might call, a rebel kind of energy. And they still are, frankly.
Yeah. Well, your work with Sophia Foundation, which is what it started, it's now Sophia Partners.
Yes.
I'm a board member, so obviously Ginny and I are connected that way yet. But I specifically always recall your kind of initial statement of what you wanted that organization to be, and it was to radically change how we teach and learn about leadership.
That's right.
So
Yes.
that's definitely a very inner rebel spirit coming out. So
It sure was, especially back in 1996 when, it came out of me onto the paper. My vision of leadership was a circle. It was shared leadership. And at the time, that wasn't necessarily very popular. And here was, this woman um, getting traction for this kind of leadership called servant leadership, and we called it the Council of Equals model. Uh, that challenged the organizations who were pretty much pyramid style leadership with one person at the top and then a small group of people. So that was just innate in me. I came into this world thinking in circles, and it was part of what I still believe. Um, Not too long ago, I went to our pastor's church in our church in North Naples, and to my amazement, there in his office when I walked in was a circle of chairs, and he didn't even really know much history about the circle, the wisdom circle. But he said, "Well, I work in a team," and I thought, "Wow, wow, that's fabulous." So that's how I've always seen it. And those things were pushing uphill. And I believe that place that I wrote about that Persephone has in her that was trying to show that in myself, there was a calling around that. And the people that had a connection in any way to that calling came and they connected with what this vision was. In Sophia, it was serving the spirit, dignity, and potential of every person through transformative, compassionate leadership. Spirit is really probably one of the key words of my inner rebel. I asked my husband this morning, if you were to name or describe my inner rebel, what would it be? He said, spirit. I thought, wow, he really knows me, right?
Oh,
that's beautiful.
So anyone like probably the two of you, you have some connection to spirit, dignity, and potential of every person. So people came together and they climbed up that hill. We slid back down. We climbed up again. We slid back down. It was exhausting. I'm going to tell you, it was exhausting. Was it worth it? You darn right it was. And would I do it again? You darn right I would. Because at my time in 1996 and thereabouts, this essay had been written called Killing the Spirit in the Workplace. And that's what I experienced at times myself, and that's what I saw all over the place. the spirit was getting killed. And when you kill our spirit, the potential gets killed. And we can't let that happen. My inner rebel said, no, we can't let that happen. So that's kind of what I think it's about. It's about saying, no, I can't do that. I have to be about something else. So many of us climbed up that hill. We slid down, we got back up again. It wasn't always easy.
And I think we do have a long way to go. As you're talking, I lend my language to this, just to give another perspective, I guess. So the pyramid type energy in leadership is masculine, not male, but very masculine, very directed. And masculine energy can build things very quickly and make a lot of progress, and it can also crash things down very quickly. Where feminine energy, I'm going to say not women, but feminine energy tends to grow more slowly, and it also is much stronger because of the speed at which it's built. So the sliding back is reorganizing those bricks in your foundation so it's as strong as possible, so that when it's built, it can sustain the test of time. So I want to express gratitude for all that you did and everyone with you in the slide backs of like reorganizing the bricks and going again. And I do see the next generation of leaders, not just women, in what's the word? Continuing, continuing that work of taking steps and slide backs and reorganizing the bricks. But if you wouldn't have started it, right? Like, I think we owe so much to the generations that came before us that were daring and brave enough to push for balance. I'm not looking at I don't think we should be taking down the masculine to nothing. I think we should be looking for a balance between the masculine and feminine. Because the in circle is great, but it also like can be very stagnant without masculine energy to push
Oh,
you
for
forward,
sure.
right?
Oh, I so agree with you. There's a dialogue model with 4 parts to the circle, and you have the warrior, and you have the lover, and you have the challenger, and you have the person that watches over all of it, and speaks, last. And sometimes we never get that voice, but it says it's where the wisdom can be. And I love that model because it has such a balance and interrelationship between those qualities of the feminine and the masculine. I believe that the inner rebel, sometimes the feminine energy has to put a little water on that fire because that fire can get really too strong sometimes and want to do everything real fast. Um, I do believe what you say about slow and intentional and willing to adapt to what emerges, which is a feminine, I think, quality. One of the things that I hoped for originally as we started the Center for Spirituality and Leadership was some kind of an institute that would be right there. It was within Marian University. Well, it took 20 years and then some for all that was done there to then have Sophia, which is now Sophia Transformative Partners, to take all of that and work it in the world the way that the world needed. So I can remember there was a time, I just forgot about it until I read it last night, where I really shut down on myself. And I thought I was a failure in the worst way. I thought it was a calling to create that center at Marian. And it just didn't continue into its potential the way I had so hoped, and I thought it was my fault. And I really had terrible trouble with that. I would wake up in the middle of the night and I remember sitting outside my closet door in the middle of the night and just crying and feeling lost and feeling terrible, shut down on myself. And again, I journaled. And that was really important to me because one day in my journal, it said, well, go see Parker Palmer. And Parker Palmer is a writer and a teacher about the inner teacher inside of us. And he's in Madison, Wisconsin. And I knew him by this time. So I sent him a message and I said, my journal says I should come and see you. And he said, when are you coming? And I was so touched by that. And so I went to Madison and I sat in his living room with him. Really, totally like, I don't know. I lost my rebel connection, if you will. I lost my spark. I was so disappointed. And he knew the vision and he was very supportive of that. And he listened. He listened with that presence. You could even call it that feminine presence. He listened for a long time. And I just laid it all out there. I felt like, oh my God, he's just, almost like naked because I took off all the dressing. And I just, oh my gosh. And suddenly he said, well, I have a story to share with you. Okay, he told me a story. That's also could be linked to the feminine energy to bring into the field, if you will. And he told me this story about someone who had something very similar happen, but it was so much bigger. And it had so many people that were depending on this vision that suddenly just went, and my heart broke. And I thought, oh my gosh. And then he told me about how resilient this person was 5 years later when Parker saw him giving a talk. And he was so inspired by this person's resilience to come back out into the world and start again. And so something shifted inside of me immediately. And I got up and left Parker's place not long after. We were already recreating the next vision together. I was all excited, like, well, what if we did this and what if we did that? And he said, well, yeah, we could do that. And I remember going out to my red Cadillac. I had that red Cadillac for a long time. It reminds me of your couch. I got in my red Cadillac and I drove away a new person. And I was alive again and back. And, I tend to forget that, but that story was really important because I was able to share it with another young woman years back who was feeling just like I felt. And she and I sat down, we had a heart to heart, and I said, everything looks real good with what I'm doing right now, but may I share a story with you? And it really touched her. And she got back up again too. And this is really important because she's given so much through her vision and her dedication to our community. So, I just wanted to share that we need each other and we need that energy of the masculine and the feminine. And like you said, it isn't just women and men because we all have masculine and feminine energies. And how do we balance them, right? And nurture them.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we help each other, from both of those places inside of us? And I think you're so right, Erin. Not enough of those feminine qualities are always seen as important as they are.
I think it depends the circles that you're in. And it's these sorts of conversations, these sorts of stories where we want to inspire people to take the steps that you took, Ginny, and showing up and being vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Because we need that in order to connect to each other and move on to that next I mean, I think it's just part of the process of sitting in the what is. It's hard to feel, and I think letting ourselves go there and feel it in company,
Mhm.
in companionship and friendship is such a huge piece of it. And I was just thinking before we got in here. I mean, everything that we're doing with Red Couch Rebels is about encouraging community and these vulnerable, intimate conversations. And we were talking about, okay, there's people out there that don't have those sorts of connections in their life, and we're grateful to have each other on this
Mhm.
couch and have the circle that we're continuing to build and the different people in our lives. But it is so easy, I think, when we are in fear to take that step back and just say, "Ugh, I don't want to bother others with it." But that's where we stay stuck and stay in
Mhm.
fear.
Mhm.
I think you're right. Being aware, self aware that I'm stuck. Um, Maybe I would ask, like, how do you know when you're stuck? I mean, let's just talk about how do you know you're stuck? I mean, like, and then what do you do? What helps? Well, how
Well,
did
for
you,
me,
yeah, go ahead. Well,
go ahead.
how did you know when to take the leap into these podcasts?
I'd like to hear Jenny's answer.
Sure, sure. Well, it's interesting how it all connects because I, over the last week, and I haven't had a chance to share this with Aaron yet, but over the last week, I've really been in this place of what am I doing? Like what really what really matters? And it hasn't been in this depressive state. Like it's not been anything like that, but it's been like just this. I guess in the language that we've been and the conversation we've been having here, it's that spark wasn't lit. I wasn't nurturing it. It just felt like, what's the point? Right?
Mhm,
And I could easily slide into the, parasympathetic nervous system. I just want to
mhm,
shut down, sleep. Ugh, I just not want to do anything. But I knew conversation and connection would shift it for me.
mm,
And it already has. Hearing your story, Ginny, spending time on the couch here before jumping on the podcast with Aaron has already reminded me of needing other people and it being okay to ask for help and to show up and just, I think for me personally, it's been this, I want to be there for other people and I need to be okay. Like I'll be okay, but it's been acknowledging, all right, I'm stuck because I'm not making space for
mhm,
me and what I'm feeling, whether that's fear, discomfort, lack of motivation, lack of that spirit.
mhm.
So what's always helped me and continues to is connection and conversation. So
You,
back to what was the question about the
How
podcast?
did you know?
How did I know?
yeah.
I think it
How did you
was
know?
just every time we jump on a call with you, Ginny, it would awaken something in me. And this is something that you and I experienced when we were working on the book together.
We did.
And of course, we would jump on and talk about website and social media stuff back in 2020 when it launched. But our conversations would continue and we would go off into these areas completely unrelated to the book about your journey and your explorations and what you were experiencing. And I would share the same about different things that I was looking at and different relationships in my life. And so that's continued with you and I and Aaron and wanting to share that with other people. The spark that it lit in me, I was hopeful that it would remind others, inspire others of the power within them, that potential within them. And so it was a no-brainer. Like, yes, we need to do these official podcast conversations.
Official. I don't know if I like that word,
Well,
but
official in the fact that they're recorded and we're putting them out there.
Erin is the queen of casual. Yeah.
Erin, what would you add to that about being stuck and then about taking the leap?
Being stuck. How do I know? How do I know when I'm stuck is when I'm not in flow. Does that work as an answer? So when this all started, even before the podcast idea, it was the app download, not download onto my phone, but like energetic ideas flowing into me of like all these concepts that were interconnected. And I got to play with these ideas, and I was definitely in the flow. And I get such a energy influx when I'm in flow. And to be surrounded by people that were as excited about it as I was, that helps. It helps to keep the flow going because they're feeding into that too. So we're all helping each other's energy flow continue. Shifting away from flow, like when you're on this momentum and there's flow going, I found myself, I had to shift away for my business. I'm in the busy season right now for my other business. So I found some resentment in having to shift away from my flow, which really put me in like a downward spiral. And it's not that my other business isn't something I enjoy. I do enjoy it, but my mindset put me in a victim mentality of I want to be over there playing, right? I don't want to be in the work. Until I was listening to the book yesterday, The Well-Lived Life, and there was a reminder in there about how we can have juice from more than one space.
Yeah.
And that was really all I needed to shift my mindset, because my busy work right now in my busy season is something I love doing. It's working outside, working with the plants. The weather's been gorgeous. And here I am stuck in my head, all victim-y, like what a waste, right? So I felt like that timing was so important for me. Divine timing, it felt like of a gift of like, just be present, and this will fuel or juice the other project you have going too. It's not either or. So yes, that's how I would know, like I got myself stuck by letting myself go into victim.
Yeah.
And then how did I know about the podcast? I feel it's a calling. Even bigger than the podcast is the rebellion. And it's like the concept of it is unfolding. And like you were talking earlier of the startup curve, I think she called it. Is that what you called it, Jenny?
I did.
I think so.
The startup curve.
The startup curve.
Yep.
Yeah, what I love about our partnership is that we're both okay with not knowing yet. Like, we love that we don't know exactly. We have like a core of like knowing that the rebellion is about rebelling against disconnection. Like, we know that, like, as a society and in our community, we want a rebellion against the status quo of disconnection, right? But beyond like a few pieces, we're really excited about the community coming together at the round table, online even, of like showing us what it needs. And to not have it all figured out up front, it feels so right.
Yeah. We just have to remind ourselves of that when we get in our head, trying to plan, trying to figure it out, trying to make, the details work out. It's like, okay, nope. Deep breath.
Breath, it's going to unfold,
Yep.
and we need to leave space.
So I wonder if you feel what I feel. I think you just connected the energy of the wild woman to the inner rebel. you start laughing. I think you used the words having fun.
Oh,
And so
yeah.
I was kind of sitting in this question, how are they connected? And I think the wild woman wants to like enjoy this. It can't all be so hard. The wild woman wants to dance, dance the dance of not knowing, is kind of what I just heard. It's like Jenny and I, you said, Erin, can stay in the dance of not knowing. And when we get in our heads and we start looking for, well, like, do we have any return on this investment or however you want to look at it? And you say, oh, whoa, 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 give us some time here. And you take a deep breath. It's kind of a dance and it's humorous. You laugh. I think there's something about the wild woman who says, can this please be fun?
I think that's also maiden energy. Yeah. Do you remember the maiden energy? Wild woman, if you're looking at the life cycle, is like post menopause, the second mountain, all of that phase of life. But maiden energy is like young, dreamer, dancing, playful, doesn't have as many inhibitions in some ways. So like to me, when you're describing it, I can see the wild woman in that, but I also feel the maiden.
Yeah, I think all of these archetypes
Interesting.
are really a great way to stop and look at the stories we're telling ourselves.
I
And
do. I do.
and I think it is not taking ourselves so seriously and stepping more into that balance of the feminine. I mean, the masculines, there's archetypes tied to masculine energy as well. But I know for me as an achiever, I have more masculine energy. So these stories and these characteristics, just making the time and the space to connect to them, it is invigorating. It is a reminder to just let things unfold. And that's the power of them. I can see myself in them and it shows me a pathway, I suppose, too.
Well, and I was thinking also, noticing, Erin, in your story, sometimes the other thing you need to attend to, like your garden and all the outdoor activities, create that fertile space, that reflection period, that pause, if you will, into a place that's very creative, filled with creativity, energy, and that, in a way, gives you that freshness of the maiden energy, the freshness of spring, the freshness of the new season, all the new growth, and every way you can experience it. So it's like part of the flow. You don't get out of the flow necessarily. The flow just says, kind of widens its wings and invites you to the intensity where you're building something, moving towards something, gets a little thick. And then, the other energy says, whoa, let's go out here for a while and tend to the flowers. And that was sort of what happened to me, I think, in the woods time. And what I took away from that I never wanted to forget was it can't be all this intensity. You've got to pause. You've got to take your time for your walk, take your time for your journal. Um, for me, those feminine qualities, boy, I had such a strong masculine. I was going to make it happen, somehow. We were going to move ahead and we can do anything, like my dad said. Well, yeah, um, if we're really going to be a caring, connected community, then whatever's trying to birth needs to be there for everyone in some way. So there's going to be some shifts and some things that take that flow and go boop suddenly somebody says, well, wait a minute, no, or whatever. So, like, I think what I'm really trying to say also is I had to learn to really love myself. And every year when we did this virtual servant leadership program, we did it on the phone and like 10, 12 people came in. There was always at least one woman who said, I don't have any self compassion. I need to learn
Mm.
self compassion. Every year, and I do think it's still so true. Um, for women, especially, we want to please everybody else, or we want to do things for people, or be there for people, and we really don't get in touch. At least I didn't with my own feelings, my own soul, my own heart, and the voice of that. And I found out that that takes space and time for this. They Parker always would call our soul, it was like a wild animal and would only come out when it was safe. So, like, you
Mm.
can't be walking in the woods and expect to see a fox right in front of you very often. So, if my soul's like that, what does that mean? What do I have to do and give it in order for it to speak, my heart to speak, the wisdom to really show itself? I didn't really know that. I knew it when I was 10 in the treehouse, but then I forgot. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't really reconnect until I went into the woods when I was 50.
I hear a little. There's like an undertone, maybe of some even judgment in that there was such a long gap between that.
Yeah, that's
But
true.
in speaking of self-compassion, when I look back on my journey and others' journeys around me, I think we almost have to go off that path to encounter other lessons and other people and accumulate those experiences to allow for our growth. And when we come back to center, to like figure out which pieces are we going to keep bringing along with us and which ones are we getting rid of, right? But we
That's a
need those
very good piece.
experiences.
Yes, yes. What do we want to keep? What do we want to let go of? Great, great piece. Um, Actually, Jean Houston taught me that way back when. It was one of her favorite things to say. What do you want to keep? What do you want to let go of? Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I think you're right on. I think over time, it all makes sense. Even the stuff that didn't. Over time, it
Yeah, yeah.
just really does. It makes sense. And the other thing that I'm noticing, and I don't know, maybe you don't look at it like this, but in a sense, our bodies, they're sort of a linear growth, kind of like a plant. We come up and we go and then we bloom and then we go back down and we our bodies die and we transition to whatever. But this world and what it needs, it's not linear. It's not like all of a sudden, we focused on teaching dialogue skills and everybody got it. And I went through this period of time where I thought learning how to dialogue and compassionately be present and listen to each other, well, now that's old stuff. I gave my files away and I moved here and everything. And I thought, well, people have new ways of doing this. Well, it's never been more needed than it is
Mhm.
right now. And all the things that we were doing, unbelievable how relevant they are 25 years ago to what's going on in the world today. So I have relearned the way that I look at this. And I say, well, there are some things that are like part of my destiny thread, some things I came here to be about, some things I cared about in the world in this world of human beings. Remember in the workplace where whatever human beings needed was not even there. We didn't even use the word spirit or being dedicated to growth. It was all about the bottom financial line. It took a long time to develop an awareness of the third bottom line, which is the people who come in and work together. What kind of an experience are they going to have? I'm a leader. I have responsibility toward their potential, their spirit, their dignity, their sense of community. Wow, I can remember then I started talking like that and I was looked at like I was crazy. Like, we don't have any money for that, you know? I honestly, I remember all that. So there is time. It is urgent. And now is the time. And we are the people. And after I die, after you die, people are going to be doing some of this stuff because it's not linear. That's the best way I can say it. These are things that are going to come up in one way or another, I believe, as long as human beings are here. Because this is the stuff of being human, right? Being vulnerable, learning how to love ourselves, learning how to hear that deep place within our hearts, learning how to care for each other, about each other. All these things, they're still as essential, if not more, than the day we did all that stuff 25 years ago.
Absolutely.
Isn't that that surprises me? I'm surprised. I had to change my perspective, and I think Dr. Gladys's book was really helpful with that, as well as talking with you. I had to really, really change how I saw that, and then I thought, well, you're not dried up. You're not done. You can do some things here. It's still your destiny thread, and you still can do these things. So that's all kind of happened since we started talking.
Love it. Love it. There is so much goodness here. Oh my gosh. I think we're going to have to conclude this part 1. And we are going to pick it right back up with part 2. So keep on listening. Stay tuned. Thank you so much for joining us on the Red Couch. We would love if you would head on over and subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. It helps us tremendously as we rebel against the status quo of disconnection. We need you. We appreciate you. You can also head on over to our website, redcouchrebels.com, to send us a note and explore your inner rebel with us on our online network. We'd love to see you there.